Okay, so we're talking about the negative aspects of being a Baal Gaiva, of being proud and arrogant. And I mentioned last week that in Gaiva in Hebrew covers both words in English. In other words, Gaiva it covers arrogance and pride. And the truth is, there is good pride, but when pride brings, in other words, a person's proud of their accomplishments and their real accomplishments, that's a good thing. But pride is really not good when it's accompanied by arrogance, and that's what gaiva is. It's a pride which looks down at others and has negative ramifications because it's brought the whatever you accomplished bloated you, made you much more significant in your own eyes than you should be, and therefore you look down at others. And it says the Chazal say for Omer Haiman the Yoyer, somebody who's about gaiva, Afila Inche Bese Lo Miskabel. Even the people of his household, they don't accept him. In other words, you have if you have a father or a husband or a mother, which a wife who is arrogant, so then they people, even the people in the household, they don't accept them because they find them to be intolerable. Shemar Gever Yahir V'Lo Yinaveh. Afilu B'Naveh Shalo. A person who is Yahir, which is arrogant, he will not be able to be at peace, even in his own household. A Naveh is a household. In his own household, he won't be able to be at peace because no people don't have tolerance for a Baal Gaiba. They are overwhelming in a negative way. It's literally they're full of hot air, and the hot air pushes everybody away. The gaiva brings the person to pursue kavod. If a person has that kind of arrogance, the person he always is pursuing honor, and he wants to become higher, kind of superior, and in control of other people. I had one Rebbe who who I hated and hated me. I don't know if I told you about him. My 8th grade Rebbe. I couldn't stand him for several reasons, and he couldn't stand me either. He put me, and I was in Israel at the time, and everybody sits at double desks, but that's so I shouldn't have a negative influence on anybody. He set me by myself at a single desk, and put me all the way in the back of the room, towards the door, where not near anybody else, but in a way that the door opened a little bit in front of, not exactly the back of the room, but a little bit forward from the back of the room. So every time the door opened, it would open in front of my desk. So I was in back of the door whenever the door was opened. So we did not have a good relationship. So one of the things which annoyed me immensely at the time was that he made us talk to him in the third person. He used to say, in Hebrew, you would say, instead of saying Ata Amarta, you would say Harav Amar, right? You'd say, you would speak to them not directly, but in the third person. Now, he always said to us, I don't do this for my covet. I do this in order to train you because later on, you're going to have to do this for your other Rebbeim when you grow older. So whether he was sincere or not, I didn't believe he was sincere about it. I believe that he wanted his own covet, and therefore I found it extremely annoying. So as a result, I myself, when I have taught classes, I've never actually asked students to address me in the third person. It's interesting because when I was teaching high school, kids used to go not talk to me in the third person, but when they came back from Eretz Yisrael, then they started speaking to me in the third person because they picked it up over time that you're supposed to say they're supposed to speak to Rebbe in the third person, and it wasn't because I told them to do so. So, but if a person is, I feel very uncomfortable when I make a phone call saying, even to a student, getting on the phone and saying, this is Rabbi Beckhofer. I almost never introduce myself like that because I feel it's also a bit arrogant. So I just say this is Yosef Beckhofer because I feel that one has to be very careful about gaiva, and Rambam says one has to distance to himself as much as possible from it because it's a very, very dangerous midah. And one of the great dangers is that you're always looking for your own honor. You're being rodef kavod. We start to be superior over other people. know what happened to Korach and his people because of his arrogance. He wanted to become great, and he took greatness, which was not given to him from heaven. In other words, Korach came and he pursued this covet on his own. And as a result, he got into a big fight. And from this machlokes came out jealousy, and there came about hatred. So from Korach's gaiva, he caused a tremendous tragedy in Klal Yisrael. Baal gaiva is so convinced of their greatness that they're willing to sacrifice other people and themselves for the greatness which they think is theirs. And these are all midos which are very detrimental. Hashem, as he explains throughout the Sefer. Sof davar. In the final analysis, anybody who beautifies their body in order to be proud, arrogant, they forget Hashem. They're not concerned with mitzvos. And they're not pursuing good deeds. Because his entire intent is on himself. To adorn his body, which is eventually going to be rot and be consumed by worms. But Baal gaiva is very much rooted in this material world, and they want to make sure that their material self is as proud as possible. So he said first he deals with males and then he deals with females. The male is going to adorn himself in front of women in order that he should find favor in their eyes. And then he's going to become close to them. She's going to come to a frivolous behavior and lightheaded behavior. In other words, this is one of the ramifications of gaiva in an external way, is that it causes a person to inappropriately interact with the other gender. The Gama Isha, now he deals with women. A woman who beautifies herself in front of men. With this, she ignites their hearts. And puts the thoughts, inappropriate thoughts, in their hearts. And this, her punishment is very great. She knows because she puts a stumbling block in front of many people. Now, this is a very unpopular perspective in today's day and age. The feminist perspective, the dominant feminist perspective, is that women should be able to dress how they want. And if the men are allured by the women, tough luck on the men. That's their problem, not the women's problem. So to a certain extent, that's true. Obviously, men have to safeguard themselves, and they can't use it as an excuse that the woman dressed inappropriately. That's certainly correct. But there is nevertheless this idea that I am responsible for what I do and how people respond to me in a public sphere. In other words, I can't just say that everybody has their own rights, I have my own rights, and I don't care about anybody else, which is actually the American way. But everybody has a responsibility to think, how does the way I go in public impact upon other people? And this is true not just about matters which have to do with how one dresses, but how one conducts himself in general in a public place. You are not free to go about your life as you please. You don't have the right to freedom in that, to that sense that America would like to give or likes to perceive its citizens as possessing. So, we find that people are not mocking like this anymore because we're so used to it. But evidently back then, it was considered to be very arousing for a man to look at the colored garments of a woman, even if they were on a wall. In other words, she wasn't wearing them, They were stretched out to dry, or they're hanging on a hanger. Even if she's not wearing them. So if that is enough to provoke those thoughts, so certainly there is a great punishment to a woman who deliberately adorns herself in front of men in order that they should gaze at her. It's interesting. The word in the English here is ogle her. Ogle is like to look with intensity, to attract attention. I mentioned this last week that it's one of the many tragedies of the English language is that the word for a woman to look good is attractive. And that in of itself is a very bad word, because it means that the way, if a woman looks good, then it means she's looks in a way which attracts attention. So because that was attractive mean. Attractive means people are attracted to her. So that is unfortunate, because that word in of itself puts an entire negative spin on how a woman dresses herself, how a woman presents herself. And it should really be some other adjective. Even a word like beautiful is much better than a word than the word attractive, because beautiful can be a thing in and of itself, whereas attractive implies that I'm trying to attract somebody else. So this is one problem, which is a perp gaiva. If a person has the gaiva, which is means that he finds his fulfillment in attracting people of the opposite gender, whether it's a man or a woman. And that is something which, again, as American society is very much prevalent, because Western society in general, because one of the ways in which people measure themselves is in how appealing they are to the opposite gender. And that's a bad thing. And also, hagaiva mevili de taiva. This pride brings a person to desire. Somebody who is proud, libo rachavu misav l'chol davar. Somebody who's proud, you have to imagine that he's like a big balloon who's constantly expanding in all directions and either pushes things aside or encompasses them within his ever widening balloon of hot air. So therefore, a person who feels that he is God's gift to mankind, he feels everything God put in this world is for him. And the truth is, there's a chazal about that. Chazal say, Masechet Sanhedrin, that chayav adam lomar b'shvili nivra olam. Person supposed to say, the world is created for me, which sounds like a person should say, well, everything in the world should be for me. That's not what it means. B'shvili nivra olam means it'd be worthwhile if God could create a world just for one human being. But of course, there are many other human beings. So it's not that God created the world just for you. You are significant enough that the world could have been created for you alone, but it's not. So therefore, you have to give other people the respect and proper dignity and proper positive attitude, which you have to give to them. But a Baal Gaiva doesn't think that way. The Baal Gaiva takes B'shvili Nivra Olam in a simple sense. The world is created for me. He says, the taiva and desire he amida hara shebechol hamidos. Now I think we can. This not everybody agrees with this. A lot of Bali Machshava hold that the worst midah is actually kavod, but that you could say is part of gaiva. But a lot of others say the worst midah is actually kina, is jealousy. But taiva is up there. It's either number one or number two. So taiva, he says it's the worst of all midas, desire. He savem machmas gava, so because a person desires on account of his pride, to wear expensive clothes, and build big mansions, and to eat very good food. Somebody is a Baal Gaiva, always wants higher and higher things. But he might not be able to afford these things. And as a result, he'll come to steal and to rob. Because somebody who's a Baal Gaiva, his heart desires V'rochav kayam liyisasher, and it's wide like the sea to try and grow wealthy. V'lo yesameach l'chalko. He's never happy with what he possesses. Kim'at beina ma sheyesh lo, because whatever he has is going to be too little. If he rove hotzos tavaso tavas kavaso, because he has tremendous expenses for the desires which come from his arrogance. So the Orchos Tzaddikim saying that taiva is a direct result of gaiva. A person who's humble, he doesn't think anything is coming to him. He thinks, I am only going to get what Hashem wants to give me, and that's all I need, and that's all I deserve. He doesn't think, I'm so great, I want this and I want that. He understands, I'm not so great, or I don't need these things. They're beyond me. So he's saying a person who knows his place or her place in the world is not going to be as big about taiva as a person who thinks that they are God's gift to the world. That's one of it comes from gaiva. Vo gaiva goremesh lo yesavlo lisbol abrios. Also, a person about gaiva has a very short fuse. People who are arrogant look to themselves as being the focus of creation, and other people, if they don't do or don't get what I want, what I mean, what I would like them to do, so then they have a short temper. They can't tolerate that other people don't understand that they are the center of the universe. So they don't have any tolerance or any patience for any other people. There's no need to expand on the lowness of somebody who's not tolerant. Everybody knows that a person who's not tolerant is extremely, extremely difficult and very, very unpleasant individual. So, but the thing is like this. Since we learned all the bad things about gaiva, which are bad, and Orchos Tzaddikim always starts out with a bad midah telling us what's bad about the midah length. But there's also a good gaiva. And in this he differs with the Rambam. The Rambam holds there's no such thing as good gaiva. Nothing. There's no good gaiva. Gaiva is always bad. But the Orchos Tzaddikim says it's not true. There is a type of gaiva which is positive. Zosi gaiva saguf shitova. What's a pride which is in the body, which is good. Shema Yomar Adam. A person might say, "Hold that gaiva midah rako kach." Since gaiva is such a terrible midah, ever she met a b'yosef, I'm going to distance myself from it to the extreme. Actually, basar, I won't eat meat. I won't drink wine. I won't get married. He won't live in a pleasant place. He won't wear pleasant clothing. But sackcloth and coarse wool. It's going to have deliberately torn and dirty clothes. And it's going to use vessels which are dirty and disgusting. It's not going to wash his face, hands, and feet to the point that he's going to look darker in his countenance than anybody else. He's going to take these extreme measures, so he's going to be so distant, make sure to distance himself from gaiva to the point that you can't get even further from gaiva. So he says, somebody who follows this extreme aversion for gaiva is called a sinner. Harei omer b'nazir. By nazir it says, v'chiper olav asher chatan nefesh. He needs, even though nazir is very holy, and nazir is a positive, to be a nazir is a very positive thing, but there's an element of a sin in nazirus. There's one aspect of nazirus which is not good. Even though it's necessary, it's not good. What's that? You have to refrain from wine. He says, for that, yeah, a nazir has to be a karma chatas because he forswore wine. Somebody who only refrained from wine is called a sinner. If you refrain from everything, you're certainly a sinner. So a person is never supposed to go to an extreme. By the way, a person who goes to an extreme, they're in danger of being a Baal Gaiva the other way, right? Person can say, look, I refrain from everything. Look how holy I am. That's what Chazal call Chassid Shoita, right? Somebody whose Chasidus is foolish because it's detrimental to them. The moment you think you're holier than other people, better than other people, then all the chumras which you have and all the special aversion to this world which you have backfires because I think I'm better than everybody else. So that is one problem with going way too far in the other direction. But another problem is that the Torah wants people to live normal lives. Torah wants people to be in this world and being Mekadesh Shem Shamayim by doing the right thing in the right way and not to be extreme in a way which makes a person seem strange, outlandish, or it takes a person away from society. So that's something which a person has to be careful about. Not to go, in that case, not to be so much against his own self that he puts himself down too far. Amr Chachamim said, Lo dayacha mashu asra Torah. It's not enough the Torah forbade you. Torah forbids us to do many things. El Shato said, Lechad bar macherim. You have to forbid by yourself other things. Al inazeh chayotze b'zeh mar Shlomo, al ti tzaddik harbei. It's an amazing statement by Shlomo Melech. Don't be such a big tzaddik. And don't make yourself so smart. Lama tishomeim. Why should you destroy yourself? In other words, people think I'm bigger tzaddik than the Torah requires me. I'm a bigger chacham than the Torah requires me to be. And then ultimately a person destroys themselves by not following a middle path. And that the middle path is to not go too far in the other direction. In other words, as bad as Gaiva is, a person can't negate themselves. And, that's what we say that a person has low self-esteem is also not good. A person has to have self-esteem. A person has to know that, like we said before, Yishvili Nivra Olam would have been worthwhile to create the world just for him. A person has to know that if Hashem created him, tell him Elohim, then he has a significant substance, meaning, and actually he has to act accordingly. So therefore, a person has to always know that they are significant and not completely negate themselves. That's another humility which is bad and harmful and not productive. So what's the derech hayeshara? What's the straight path? Haderech hayeshara ba'adam she'en naki b'chol yanav. It's to be clean in all his matters. Now, cleanliness here is a parameter of good deeds. In other words, this is a way in which the key doesn't just mean to be clean. It means a person should do things in a clean way. Also, Yubash Begadim Benoni, wear average clothes. The lo mabushim aniyim hamevazim lavsham, not the clothes of poor people, which embarrass the people who wear them. You should wear average clothes, which are nice and clean. Not what you can afford. And in fact, the rich person should be able to have better clothes than a person who's a poor person, but not something which is showy, not something which is elaborate, not something which goes beyond the average. So this is different in different places. Like I was with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law in Eretz Yisrael past few weeks, and they don't have a dining room table. They don't have a dining room set. They have a big plastic table with plastic chairs. And they could afford to have a nice wooden dining room table and nice wooden chairs, but they have plastic. Now, where they live on a moshav in Israel, that's not outlandish. It's something which is acceptable. Here, that would be perhaps not so acceptable because we live in a different level of material existence. It could be here also be okay. I'm not saying, but every place is different, and you're not supposed to be too much one way or the other way, deviating from the norm in your place, because then you run the risk of gaiva in either direction. You're going to be about gaiva because you have something which is too elaborate, about gaiva because you're living so simply that you think to yourself, wow, I'm so holy. So therefore, a person has to find the middle level according to where they find themselves on the socioeconomic scale. So you might say, a person should never have stains or fat marks on his oily marks on his clothing. They shouldn't be ripped. But they shouldn't be elaborate like the clothing of people who are arrogant. And again, noki here doesn't just mean clean hygienically. You shouldn't eat the delicacies of a king. But if you eat an average food and an average drink, based on what he can afford. You shouldn't eat and drink and eat in disgusting vessels. Because then you commit the avera of being disgusting. There's an avera of being disgusting and making yourself disgusting. Everything has to be clean. Also his table, also his bed, unikim, everything should be cooked clean. Also his body should be clean and not polluted. It should be careful to wash his face, hands, and legs, and occasionally his entire body. Like you find this interesting story with Hillel. At one time he was leaving his students. He was walking, and they're walking with him. The student said to him, Rebbe, where are you going? So he said, I'm going to do a mitzvah. What is this mitzvah? I'm going to go wash in the bathhouse. They said, is that a mitzvah? Go to the bathhouse? Hey, you say yes. If statues of kings, which they put up in theaters and circuses, the person in charge of statue, who more he scrubs and cleans them, scrubs and rinses them, and they pay him money to do that. And not only that, but he's appreciated among the greats of the kingdom. And I was created in the form and image, whatever that means. Hashem made man in his image. So, in other words, Hillel is saying that it's a mitzvah for a person to have self-respect, for a person to have dignity, for a person to treat the gifts he got from HaKadosh Baruch Hu as true gifts. Voted for everything Hashem made is for him, and therefore we have to make sure to do with it what is Hashem wants us to do with it. Anybody who's care about these things for the purpose of the mitzvah, in other words, the Shem Shemayim, located, and they dress nicely, and they go around clean, and they make sure that all the matters are done in a respectable and dignified way. Located not in order to adorn oneself and to be proud. Even though these things seem like their pride, since your intent is for the sake of heaven, therefore it's a mitzvah in it. So till now he's been talking about gaiva, about how to use the body in Shem Shemayim. Now he has to talk about how you're going to use the. I'm going to leave this for now, but gaivas chachma ma'asim tovim. Okay, in other words, there is people have gifts in chachma and ma'asim tovim, and how they use them is a way in which is the way in which they can display gaiva or they can display anova. I have to tell you, I remember in sixth grade when you in the geography bee, how you did not want to take precedence. I think also in eighth grade, take precedence over your friend, right? And I was so amazed at that. I know I tried to push you to actually compete in the end, and you didn't want to compete, but that was incredible. Enough on your part. I was so blown away by that, and I continue to be blown away about now, years later, because that is something which indicates utter lack of gaiva in chachma ma'asos in chachma, and Ashrayach, it's amazing. So I really found.
I'm pretty sure I was just scared to go on stage and compete, but thank you.
I don't believe that. Okay, but that's part of your anova that you claim that that's the reason why you didn't do it. But okay, but that was I was really impressed, and that's something which other people can learn from you, and they should learn from you, and that's something which I think will Mir Hashem come back to next week. Okay. Thank you for coming tonight. Any questions?
Yeah. So you said that the Rambam disagrees.
Yeah.
So does that mean he doesn't think you should do the things that this is saying, or he just doesn't consider that to be gava?
He doesn't consider them to be gaiva. The second, yes, he considers gaiva to be the internal attitude, independent of how one conducts himself. And he's saying the internal attitude has to be completely humble. But he would also agree with Orchos Tzaddikim. What the Orchos Tzaddikim was calling a little bit of good gaiva, he would call a normal way of living. So he wouldn't go. Yes, it's more of a matter of semantics than it is of. And there are other things as well. It says that Talmid Chacham has to have a certain degree of gaiva. It's the way Chazal put a shminis shebeshminis, an eighth of an eighth. So maybe when we get there, we'll talk. He's going to mention. We'll talk about that. So the Rambam also agrees that there's a certain amount of dignity which a Talmid Chacham has to have. But again, he's going to say that that's not gaiva. Rambam's definition of gaiva is the internal attitude of arrogance, whereas the Orchos Tzaddikim is being much more expansive, right? And the Rambam gives far fewer details about what gaiva is good, what gaiva is bad, whereas the Orchos Tzaddikim goes into much greater detail. So I think that they will both agree in the end. It's just a matter of perspective, like you put it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, have a good night. Thank you.
Good night.